are here today. I really am. I'm hopeful for you. Hope is probably one of the words that I've experienced more and want to experience more of than anything else there is. And there's not enough of it, right? I mean, that's one thing we don't hear enough, especially when it comes to our health. Now, as a nutrition coach, I come to this from my own journey. I didn't come to this because, I wanted to have this career. I came to this because I was sick. I came to this because I didn't have answers. I came to this when I was at a point of really despair, if you will. I didn't know what to do. I had hypertension. Both of my grandfathers had died of heart disease. They both had heart attacks. I had been born with a heart murmur, and I had felt it in my body. Something wasn't right. When I was diagnosed with diabetes, I started to track back and realize where my hypertension came from, where my high blood pressure came from, the high triglycerides, the stroke in my optic nerves, which was couched in the terms of ischemic optic neuropathy. What that was? And I didn't know. Was it a blockage? Was it a constriction? No one said anything. But it all had to do with my heart. It had to do with heart disease, which remains the number one killer in the US today. So listening to Dr. Eric Akin is something I hope will bring you hope. I hope and pray it will bring you hope, that there is an answer, that there is the possibility that maybe, just maybe, you can do something about it and not just take more meds that manage, but to actually reverse what's been happening. I'm just here to save your life. And I hope that this message and this seminar will help you. I know how much it's helped me, and I learn from it every single time. So without further ado, I'm going to reach over here to Dr. Akin, and we're going to listen to somebody.
Thank you so much. Those kind words. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I get it right the first time. I'll do this over here. Hopefully this is going to fit. I apologize. Oh, now hang on a minute. I got to do this first, apparently. Okay, now, sorry, false start. All right, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Eric Akin, and you may be wondering why is a neurosurgeon talking about heart disease tonight? And it is because heart disease right now is probably one of the hottest controversies in all of medicine. Right now in neurosurgery, we don't have anything to fight about, actually. And of course, being a neurosurgeon, we like to get in the middle of the action, but usually when doctors fight about something, it means is about to change. And I have taken a good hard look at the controversy. I'm on the side of the new way of thinking, and I feel like I should put my shoulder into the shove toward this new model that we have. And so tonight, I'm going to talk about heart disease, but in a way that most of us have learned it. And this is not a talk about fear. It's not a talk about blame. It's not a talk about clarity, or I should say it is a talk about clarity. And most of us believe that heart disease is caused by one main thing. And that one thing, we kind of got fixated on. Just 2 years before Amy's husband had his first, there was this landmark study that came out that said that those statin drugs that she was talking about, that her doctor pushed so hard, this major study came out that said that when you cross 40, even if your labs are normal, you should start taking a statin, like a vitamin. It just needs to go on the list of things to take every day. And so all of these doctors, especially cardiologists, became very fixated on this. And it just happened to happen at the time that her husband, who was relatively young at the time, started having some serious issues. For decades, medicine has been focused around almost entirely that one thing. But what I'm going to show you tonight is that the biggest driver of heart disease today isn't what most people think. And once you understand it, a lot of things will suddenly make sense. So, heart disease is still the number one cause of death in the United States. And that's true despite decades of cholesterol drugs and blood pressure medicines and stents and bypass surgeries. So the first question we should ask is simple. If we're doing the right thing, why is it still happening? And this doesn't mean that doctors are bad or that medicine has failed, even though that's what Yvette wants you to think. This doesn't, it means that we're focusing too much on late stage fixes instead of the early root cause. And for most of our lives, we've been told a very simple story that cholesterol clogs arteries and lower the cholesterol and you have fewer heart attacks. And that idea became so dominant that it shaped food labels, it shaped dietary guidelines and medical visits. But here's the key point. And this is even many of the scientists involved early on admitted that they were not sure that cholesterol intake would actually reduce heart disease at all. They didn't think it even changing the amount of cholesterol that you ate, they didn't think it even changed the numbers on your blood tests. Yet the policies moved forward anyway. And tonight, cholesterol doesn't matter at all. I'm saying that it was never this much weight by itself. So this is where things start to get uncomfortable, especially if you bring it up with cardiologists. But it's also very enlightening. When researchers looked closely at heart attacks, they noticed something surprising. That most heart attacks happen, cholesterol is in the range. I want to show you this graph here. The gold line here that you can see in the middle is the cutoff for normal LDL, the cholesterol. Now you can see these peaks. These peaks represent people having heart attacks.
All right, did y'all catch that? This blew me away. That people with low cholesterol are the ones having heart attacks. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Notice most of the peaks are on the normal side of that gold line. So how do you explain this? That doesn't mean that cholesterol is meaningless. It means that cholesterol alone is not telling the whole story. And if cholesterol were the main cause, then we would expect that most heart attacks would be on the right side of that gold line.
Right.
But that's not what is happening.
Bam.
So if cholesterol doesn't explain most heart attacks, we have to ask a better question. What does? So on a population level today, the biggest driver is insulin resistance. Insulin resistance affects the majority of adults, and it's estimated about 88%. Even many who look healthy. It quietly damages blood vessels for years before a heart attack ever even happens. And this is why heart disease seems to come out of nowhere. But it wasn't sudden. It was silent. Here's one of the most important ideas of the entire talk. You could have a normal blood sugar, a normal hemoglobin A1C, and a normal LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol, and still have a serious problem. Insulin resistance, in insulin resistance, the body has to make more and more insulin just to keep your blood sugar normal. So glucose looks fine on labs, but insulin is working overtime. Think of insulin like acid in like a pressure hose, like a pressure washer hose. The number on the gauge the pressure gauge looks normal. But if there's acid inside that system, then it's doing damage every single day. Eventually that hose is going to have a major problem. Fortunately, insulin is rarely,
right.
If any of you ever want to check a fasting insulin level on you, or
never ever
glucose tolerance test,
nope.
or a HOMA IR, you never hear about these tests
nope.
being checked for. If all you're checking for is a hemoglobin A1C,
there's a way to do
that's like just having a fire alarm. but wouldn't you rather know, wouldn't you like to have like a gas detector or some kind of a detector that tells you that the stove was left on before you have a fire? That's what, and we had that in medicine, but we're not using it. So this is where many well-meaning people get a false sense of security. Most doctors check the fasting glucose and the hemoglobin A1C, and if those numbers are normal, the patients are told everything looks fine. But those tests only tell us how well the body is compensating. They don't tell us how hard insulin is working behind the scenes. So someone can be on a collision course toward heart disease, even while being reassured that their labs are normal. That's not a failure of doctors, it's a limitation of what we're measuring. So insulin isn't just a blood sugar, it has powerful effects on blood vessels. When insulin stays high for years, it raises blood pressure, it damages the inner lining of arteries, it increases inflammation that leads to oxidized cholesterol particles, making them basically radiation to you, not literally. It makes plaque more likely to form. And this is why insulin resistance shows up everywhere. Heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, not just diabetes.
Right.
Now I want to show you the blood pressure connection to insulin resistance, because high insulin makes blood pressure worse in several ways. First, it tells the kidneys to hold on to and water by increasing aldosterone. Aldosterone is this hormone that will just make your kidneys the water instead of kicking it out through your urinary system. When you retain salt, that increases the blood volume and thereby increases your blood pressure. Second, it reduces nitric oxide, helps blood vessels relax, so vessels stay tighter than they should. Third, over time, insulin causes the artery walls to thicken. Thicker walls means a narrower opening for blood flow through that vessel. Are there any plumbers in here tonight? If you're a plumber, you're familiar with a bit of physics. It's called Bernoulli's equation. And basically, the more narrower the pipe at a constant pressure or at a constant force, which is the force of your heart, the pressure rises. All three of these push blood pressure in the wrong direction, and they start long before a diagnosis is made. Most people imagine plaque forming only on the inside of arteries, like grease in a pipe. But that's not actually how it often starts. Large arteries, they have their own tiny blood supply in the wall itself. If you look right here, this is sort of a blown up section. These are little blood vessels that feed the artery blood. The artery needs its own blood supply. And these are called the vasa vasorum. And these little fragile arteries, they're not built to handle chronic stress. High insulin and inflammation make these tiny vessels leaky. And when these vessels leak into the artery wall, a clot forms. And then those clots become the starting point, a seed for plaque. So the plaque often begins inside the artery wall, not on the surface in the lumen here, like this. It forms in the middle of the wall. So healthy blood vessels have a smooth protective coating on the inside called the glycocalyx. You don't need to remember the term, but you see this is what is represented right here. That is like a slicker. It makes sure that everything flows through that vessel normally, like it should. Think of the glycocalyx as like a fine mist that you see on the grass on a fall morning, cold fall morning. It's very delicate. And if the conditions change at all, like it gets just a 1 degree higher in the temperature, it's gone, right? And that's the same way with the glycocalyx. If you start becoming insulin resistant, it starts to evaporate. And when it does, things don't flow through as well. Chronic inflammation, driven in large part by high insulin, damages that protective layer. When it's stripped away, the vessel becomes irritated, it becomes fragile, small ulcers form inside the artery. Now you got a problem. So let's zoom out and look at the population level. When researchers account for insulin resistance, diabetes, prediabetes, metabolic dysfunction, the numbers are staggering. If insulin resistance disappeared today, we estimate that 60 to 70% of heart attacks in the United States would not happen. Now, that's compared to 1% reduction
Wow.
by statin drugs,
Wow.
1% versus almost 70%. That's a huge
That's
difference.
crazy.
So that doesn't mean that insulin resistance is the only factor, but on a population level, it's the largest driver of cardiovascular disease.
That's
That's why focusing on insulin resistance isn't just helpful, it's essential. So a reasonable question is, if insulin resistance is this important, why don't we hear more about it? We're still looking at the smoke on the ceiling instead of the fire that's burning in the basement. One reason is simple. We tend to keep fighting the last battle that we understood. Cholesterol was easier to measure. It was easier to explain and treat. And once a system is built around one idea, it's hard to change
right.
direction.
Yeah.
Insulin resistance didn't fit neatly into a single lab value or a single pill or a single projected earnings sheet in a pharmaceutical company's meetings. I said it. Insulin resistance is the problem that we're just now beginning to kind of catch on to. So in the 70s, the United States introduced national dietary guidelines. And what's forgotten is that several of the leading scientists at the time openly said they were not convinced that eating less cholesterol would reduce heart disease. And despite those doubts, the guidelines moved forward and the focus shifted toward low-fat eating, which was a disaster, and away from whole foods. The decision changed how an entire country ate for decades. After that shift, something very important happened, and it wasn't what we had hoped for. The rates of obesity skyrocketed, nearly tripled the number of obese people. Type 2 diabetes exploded, and heart disease did not disappear.
Right.
And this doesn't mean that the guidelines were evil or unintentional. It means that they missed the real problem. By focusing on cholesterol alone, we took our eyes off insulin resistance and the process quietly damaging arteries long before symptoms ever appeared.
Jeez.
When we step back and connect the dots, a clear pattern emerges. Modern heart disease is not just a plumbing problem. It's not just wear and tear.
Right.
And it's not just cholesterol. It's a metabolic problem. The same process that drives weight gain,
What our bodies do with what we
prediabetes,
eat,
fatty
right?
liver, high blood pressure, and also damaging the arteries.
This is
So that process is
golly.
insulin resistance. When you address insulin resistance, you don't just improve one number. Blood pressure goes down, inflammation comes down, vessel linings heal, plaque progression slows or reverses.
Yes.
This is why lifestyle and metabolic interventions can outperform medications
Right.
over time. Not because medicine is wrong, it has its utility, but because it's often treating the step instead of the first step. This matters because insulin resistance starts early. It only takes 6 weeks of bad eating to become insulin resistant. And often people have been insulin resistant for decades before labs start turning abnormal. It matters because people are being reassured by normal labs while your doctor is telling you everything is great, but this is going on every single day. You're taking a hit, what we call end organ damage. And it matters because
Jeez.
insulin resistance is modifiable. You can do something about
Yep.
it. So I'm going to leave you with
We
this
can.
final statement.
All
When we
right.
shift our focus from fear to understanding and from late rescue to early prevention, we can dramatically change the future of heart disease. That is the opportunity in front of us.
It's
Thank
exactly
you.
it. That's exactly it. Thank you so much, Dr. Akin. Just really hitting home. I don't know about y'all that are in here that are maybe somebody you know, somebody you love. So here's what I was talking about. The triglycerides, I'm going to put this up on my screen. If you will take your triglycerides, divide those by your HDLC. All right, your high density lipid proteins. All right, this is your good cholesterol. You take your triglycerides, divide those by HDLC. If it is less than 2, preferably 1.5 or below, you are insulin sensitive. If it's greater than 2, you are insulin resistant. And then if you are greater than 3, all right, you are really in dealing with some issues. So if you would just take that, all right there is one of the simplest things that you can do. And I asked the question, do you know anybody that is struggling with Um, heart disease. If it's you or somebody that you know or love, hey, you girl, good to see you. Glad that you're here. Welcome in. Good morning. Good morning. Glad that you're here this morning. So, if it's you or if it's somebody you know, insulin resistance, that's what Dr. Akin was addressing. And very simple lifestyle changes. We start with addressing insulin resistance and understanding insulin resistance. We start to move in the realm of healing that and getting help on this journey. And that's what this channel is really all about. Your metabolic health, my metabolic health. As I said there, if you look at that star right there, think about the hand. Think about the hand. All right. No, not talk to the hand. Just think about your hand. 5 questions to ask yourself for your metabolic health. How are you eating? How are you exercising? What are your extras or supplements that you take along the way? Who are you encouraging? And how are you elevating? The problem's not the problem. The problem many times is our mindset or our attitude about the problem. That's from Captain Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean. So I don't know anybody like that movie, if you remember that, but just a very simple thing to do is to begin to think about how are you doing those 5 things. So, and here's the thing, metabolic health, metabolism has to do with what we are eating or drinking. So the idea of metabolic syndrome, all right, which is if you have 1 of 5, or actually if you have 3 of 5 things, you might have metabolic syndrome. You do have metabolic syndrome. If you have one, just one, you're metabolically unhealthy. So if you have high triglycerides, if you have a high HDL, or actually low HDL, sorry, if you have high blood pressure and blood sugars, if you've got obesity, right? If you've got 3 or more, you've got metabolic syndrome. If you have 1, you're metabolically not healthy. And that accounts for 93% of us. So you are not alone. I think that's probably the hardest thing about insulin resistance, diabetes, and the issues around it is so many times it feels like you're alone, and you don't have to be. Healthy together and feeling great. This is what we are all about here. So thank you so much for being in here as I've been doing a little bit of my CE. And if you would like some more information, if you would like to learn more about the protocol, make sure that you like and subscribe, scan the QR code, make sure that you get connected with us. That's what we're here for. All right. Thanks so much for being in here today. If you've got no more questions, which there didn't seem to be any today, everybody's been kind of quiet. It's all good. Thanks so much. Make sure that you subscribe, though, because I just got 2 videos, 2 shorts that I just posted out that I think you want to take a look at. So thanks so much. Go get the day, make it golden, go be excellent to yourself, and go be excellent to one another. Y'all take care and have a great one.